At exactly noon, a blue figure appears in the sky above Times Square, hovering without sound, without motion, without any visible sign that he arrived from anywhere at all. Traffic stalls beneath him as drivers lean out of windows and pedestrians stop mid-stride, staring upward in confusion instead of fear. Phones rise, live streams begin, news vans redirect. People don't run because nothing about this matches the danger they recognize. It looks staged, like a stunt or a new Supe reveal that Vought failed to announce in time. Everyone waits for the familiar explanation they trust to follow. Then the glass wall of a 40-story tower behind him loses its structure and pours downward as fine sand, cascading into the street in complete silence. There is no blast, no falling debris, only a slow architectural collapse that buries hundreds before anyone understands what they're watching. The figure does not react to the destruction. He remains suspended in the air, observing without urgency or expression. Across the city, powerful people begin to understand that the systems they rely on to control chaos no longer apply to whatever has just appeared. Keep watching, because what unfolds next isn't a confrontation you can guess. If you don't subscribe, you'll miss the moment this world realizes it has stepped into something it cannot contain, and the consequences are already reshaping everything in motion. Sirens begin long before anyone gives the order to use them, because panic moves faster than authority in New York. Police vehicles choke the streets around Times Square while helicopters circle above, their camera lenses locked onto the blue figure suspended in open air like a statue that had never needed a pedestal. Reporters shout over one another without information, repeating guesses with professional confidence, while producers beg for confirmation that never comes. Inside the boys' universe, people have learned to categorize threats quickly. Terrorists explode. Supe's grandstand. Vought manages the narrative before anyone else can, but nothing about this fits the pattern. The man in the sky does not gesture, does not speak, does not even look toward the chaos below as emergency crews dig through a dune of glass that used to be a building. In a control room several miles away, executives inside Vought International watch every feed at once, each screen showing the same impossible stillness from a different angle. Analysts run facial recognition against the figure's calm expression and return nothing. No records, no files, no birth, no identity. The first thing Vought realizes is not that they are under threat, but that they have no ownership over whatever this is. One executive orders the social media blackout protocol, expecting the usual containment to follow. Instead, live streams multiply faster than they can be removed. The feeds glitch around the blue figure, pixels distorting like signal interference even though every network confirms full bandwidth. Engineers begin whispering that the problem is not technological, it is environmental. Something about his presence is disrupting the space around him. High above the city, the figure finally moves. Not quickly, not dramatically. He simply turns his head slightly to the left, as if observing a detail no one else can see. The helicopters immediately adjust their orbit, thinking he has acknowledged them. Snipers on nearby rooftops tighten their grip, waiting for permission that hasn't been given. Then every electronic scope in a 2-block radius shuts off at the exact same moment. No gunshots, no explosions, just a quiet failure of machines designed to measure reality. Panic spreads through the tactical teams because they can no longer trust what they are looking at. The man in the sky remains visible to the naked eye, but invisible to anything built to analyze him. In the Vought conference room, a single word appears on multiple analyst reports at once: anomaly. Miles away, Billy Butcher watches the footage on a stolen tablet inside a dim apartment lit only by the screen. He does not speak for a long time. The rest of the team waits for his usual sarcasm, his usual dismissal of another Supe disaster. It never comes. "That's not a Supe," he finally says, voice low and certain. Huey Campbell leans closer. "Then what is he?" Butcher doesn't answer because he has spent years studying how Supes move, how they posture, how they perform for cameras even when they pretend not to. The blue figure in the sky does none of that. He isn't posing. He isn't threatening. He isn't reacting. He looks like someone observing an experiment from outside the glass. Back in Times Square, a police commander gives the order to fire a warning shot. The sniper pulls the trigger with trained precision. The bullet never reaches its target. It disintegrates midair into a fine metallic dust that falls harmlessly toward the street like glitter in sunlight. The sniper lowers his rifle slowly, unsure if he missed or if physics itself has changed. Every officer on the radio goes silent at once because no one has a procedure for this. The blue figure glances downward for the first time, not at the sniper, not at the crowd, but at the space where the bullet ceased to exist. His expression does not change. He is not offended. He is not threatened. He is merely acknowledging an event that has already happened from his perspective. Inside Vought, a senior scientist whispers the name Dr. Manhattan after running through archived government files that were never meant to be public. A Cold War anomaly, a being that once existed in another continuity of history, a god that walked away from humanity because it no longer interested him. The room goes quiet as they realize the implications. Not that he is powerful, but that he has existed before in a world that failed to control him. In the skies above Manhattan, another helicopter loses power and drifts downward in a slow, controlled fall. The pilot swears the engines are intact. The instruments simply refuse to respond. It lands hard on an empty stretch of street, skidding through glass sand without a single mechanical failure to explain it. The figure watches this too, as if observing a predictable outcome. Several floors up inside Vought Tower, Homelander stands in front of a wall of screens showing the same image from different angles. He tilts his head slightly, confused rather than angry. This is new for him. Normally, any crisis eventually bends around his presence. People wait for him to fix it, dominate it, own it. But no one has called him yet. No one knows if he should be involved. That realization irritates him more than the blue figure itself. He expects fear when something powerful appears. Instead, he sees confusion, and confusion does not place him at the center. Homelander narrows his eyes at the screen. Why isn't he doing anything? No one in the room answers, because they are beginning to understand that the absence of action might be the action. Below, rescue crews continue digging through the sand that used to be a building. Survivors are pulled out coughing and bleeding, staring upward at the unmoving shape in the sky as if he personally chose who lived and who didn't. He offers no confirmation, no denial, only presence. For the first time in years, the city does not know where to direct its fear. And that uncertainty spreads faster than any explosion ever could. The first official statement from Vought International goes, live exactly 40 minutes after the collapse, and it sounds like every other crisis response they have perfected over decades. Calm tone, assurances of control, promises of investigation. They never say the word threat, because admitting a threat means admitting something exists outside their management. Behind the cameras, the mood is different. Legal teams argue with scientists. PR executives argue with military liaisons. Every group wants a different solution, and none of them know what they are solving. The feeds still show the blue figure hovering over the remains of Times Square, unchanged by time, unchanged by consequence. They try to establish contact. A police loudspeaker crackles to life from the street below. A negotiator speaks carefully, projecting authority into the sky. He asks the figure to identify himself, to state his intentions, to cooperate with emergency response. The words echo upward and dissolve into the air without reaction. The negotiator repeats himself louder, slower, as if volume might create meaning. The blue man does not acknowledge the sound. He looks past it, through it, as though the voice belongs to a distant past that no longer concerns him. Up in Vought Tower, Homelander finally loses patience with the waiting. No one has ordered him to stand down, but no one has asked him to step in either. That absence of instruction feels like disrespect, like someone else has become the center of attention without earning it. He smiles tightly at the room. "I'll handle this." No one stops him. Moments later, Homelander lands in Times Square with theatrical precision, boots pressing into the glass sand that used to be part of a skyscraper. Cameras immediately pivot toward him. Relief spreads through the crowd because this is familiar. This is the script they know. The strongest Supe arrives and order follows. Homelander looks up at the blue figure and hovers to meet him at eye level. For the first time, the two most powerful beings anyone has ever seen occupy the same space in the sky. Homelander speaks first, voice calm but edged with ownership. He introduces himself like a head of state addressing a foreign power. He offers help, protection, guidance. He frames the city below as something under his responsibility. The blue man listens without visible reaction. When Homelander finishes, waiting for acknowledgement, the silence stretches longer than he expects. He tilts his head slightly, confused by the lack of response. Sups fear him. People worship him. Everyone reacts to him. The blue figure simply studies his face with distant curiosity, like a scientist observing a species he has already categorized. Then he speaks. His voice is quiet, flat, and precise, carrying no emotion and no urgency. He says Homelander's name before Homelander introduces himself. He describes events from Homelander's past in neutral detail, moments no one else should know, memories Homelander has buried under years of performance and denial. Homelander's smile fades. This is not admiration. This is not intimidation. This is observation from a perspective that feels uncomfortably absolute. The blue man finishes speaking and adds, almost as an afterthought, that Homelander's presence is statistically irrelevant to what is unfolding. The word lands harder than any insult. Below them, the crowd goes silent because no one can hear the words, but everyone can see Homelander's expression change. He looks smaller somehow, not physically, but conceptually, as if someone has removed him from the center of the frame without touching him. Inside a safe house across the river, Billy Butcher watches this exchange with growing unease. He has spent years believing that if you can understand a Supe's ego, you can predict their behavior. But the blue man doesn't behave like anything Butcher recognizes. "He's not talking to him," Butcher mutters. "He's talking through him." Beside him, Huey doesn't understand what that means yet, but he feels the weight of it. Back in the sky, Homelander tries again. His tone shifts subtly from polite authority to controlled dominance. He reminds the blue man who protects this city, who the public trusts, who holds power here. The blue figure listens patiently, then explains that power structures based on fear and admiration are temporary constructs. He says it the way someone describes weather patterns, not as a judgment, as a fact. Homelander's jaw tightens. For the first time in years, he feels something unfamiliar creeping in beneath his confidence. Not anger, not rage, something closer to uncertainty. Then every digital billboard in Times Square flickers at once. They do not explode, they do not short out, they simply change. Live camera feeds replace advertisements, showing different angles of the same moment from seconds in the future. Viewers see themselves looking upward before they actually do it. They see rescue workers move before they move. They see Homelander's next expression before it crosses his face. People scream, not because of violence, but because time itself appears to have slipped out of order. The blue figure is not causing a spectacle. He is demonstrating without effort that the rules everyone relies on are suggestions at best. Inside Vought, scientists stare at the feeds in horror as predictive modeling collapses. Their systems cannot process what they are seeing because causality is no longer behaving correctly around him. Homelander notices the billboards too. He turns slightly, distracted for a fraction of a second. When he looks back, the blue man is closer. Not moving, simply closer. Homelander didn't see him cross the distance. He doesn't understand how space was reduced without motion. For the first time, a small voice in his mind suggests that he might not be dealing with a competitor. He might be dealing with something that does not recognize competition as a concept. The blue figure speaks again, calmly explaining that Homelander will attempt to assert dominance soon, that he will escalate because that is how he maintains identity. He says this not as a warning, but as a description of a sequence that has already occurred from his perspective. Homelander hears himself being predicted in real time, and it unsettles him more than any threat could. Below them, the city watches its protector hesitate. And in that hesitation, something fundamental begins to crack. Inside Vought International, the tone shifts from crisis management to quiet scientific panic. Publicly, they continue to speak about investigation and safety. Privately, entire departments are repurposed overnight into one objective: understand the blue figure before the world realizes Vought does not. Archived government files begin surfacing from sealed databases, references to a being that should not exist in this continuity. A physicist reads aloud passages describing Dr. Manhattan, a man who once disassembled tanks without touching them and spoke about time as if it were a landscape he could walk across. The room listens in silence, realizing they are not studying a new phenomenon, but rediscovering an old one that humanity had been lucky enough to forget. They begin modeling containment strategies anyway. One team proposes electromagnetic isolation. Another suggests vacuum-sealed chambers. A third begins drafting theoretical weapons based on particle destabilization. Each plan relies on the assumption that he obeys the same physical limits everything else does. No one says out loud that this assumption might be the flaw. On a screen, Manhattan still hovers above Times Square, now surrounded by military drones keeping a cautious distance. He has not moved in over an hour. He does not appear bored, impatient, or curious. He appears as though he is exactly where he is meant to be. Several floors above, Homelander stands alone in a dark conference room watching the same feed. The earlier conversation loops in his head, the calm voice predicting his behavior before he acts, the word irrelevant echoing in a place he has always protected with ego. He tells himself this is temporary, a trick, a psychological tactic, but the fact that the blue man has not tried to fight him, has not challenged him directly, makes it worse. There is nothing to push against, nothing to dominate. Across the river, Butcher and his team change locations for the third time that day, paranoid that Vaught's surveillance is accelerating. Butcher doesn't care about Vought right now. He rewinds footage of the billboards glitching time over and over, studying the delay between action and prediction. "That's not power," he mutters, "that's perspective." Huey watches, unsettled. What does that even mean? "It means he's not in the same moment we are," Butcher replies. "He's somewhere else, looking at us like we're already done." Back in Vaught's labs, scientists finally attempt the first active test. A drone equipped with advanced sensors is flown slowly toward Manhattan's position, broadcasting real-time data back to the building. Radiation levels spike unpredictably. Spatial readings fluctuate like the drone is moving through water instead of air. Then the data feed stops. Not because the drone is destroyed. The camera still shows Manhattan calmly floating in front of it, but every measurement device on board returns null values, as if the environment itself refuses to be measured. The drone gently falls out of the sky, with no mechanical damage. The scientists stare at the results and begin to understand that they are not studying an object within the universe. They are studying something that does not belong to the universe in the way they understand it. A senior analyst whispers what everyone is thinking. We can't contain this. We can't even define it. Outside, Manhattan finally moves again. He descends slowly toward the street, landing lightly on the glass sand. Rescue crews freeze in place as he walks past them, not with menace but with detached curiosity. He looks at the injured, at the destroyed architecture, at the chaos unfolding around him. He kneels briefly and touches the sand. The entire pile of crushed glass restructures itself into solid panels again, rising upward like a reversed collapse. Within seconds, a portion of the building is standing once more, perfectly intact. People stare in disbelief as a structure that took hours to destroy reforms in moments. He is not repairing the damage out of compassion. He is demonstrating that the damage was never permanent from his perspective. The message spreads instantly across news feeds. He can undo catastrophe as easily as he caused it. Vought's PR team realizes the danger immediately. If the public begins to see him as a god rather than a threat, Vought loses the emotional leverage it has cultivated for decades. Fear and admiration have always been their tools. Manhattan exists beyond both. Inside the tower, executives scramble to rewrite the narrative. They draft statements describing him as unstable, unpredictable, dangerous. But the footage contradicts them. He hasn't attacked anyone. He hasn't threatened anyone. He has simply existed, and reality bends around that existence. Homelander watches the reconstruction in silence. A part of him is impressed. A larger part is disturbed. This is the kind of power he has always pretended to represent, but never truly possessed. He finally says aloud to the empty room, "What does he want?" No one answers because no one can. Back on the street, Manhattan stands upright again, looking toward Vought Tower as if he can see through the miles between them. For a brief moment, several executives feel the irrational sensation that he is looking directly at them through the cameras. Not with accusation, with awareness. And in that awareness, they realize something far more frightening than hostility. He already knows every plan they are going to make. By late afternoon, New York stops behaving like a city that understands cause and effect. Traffic lights change at the wrong times. Elevators pause between floors for no mechanical reason. Digital clocks across Manhattan begin drifting out of sync with one another by several seconds, then several minutes. Engineers blame software errors. Utility departments blame overload from emergency response. No one considers that the problem might be conceptual rather than technical. People begin to notice something stranger than the damage in Times Square. Events feel slightly delayed, as if reality is buffering behind perception. Conversations overlap awkwardly because speakers respond a fraction of a second before words are finished. A low, collective anxiety spreads through the population without a clear source. Manhattan walks slowly through the edge of the disaster zone, and every camera follows him. He does not hurry. He does not avoid debris. He steps through the space like someone walking through a museum exhibit, examining a civilization from the outside. Rescue workers pause when he passes, not out of fear but confusion. They do not know if he is helping, observing, or something else entirely. He does not acknowledge them. He does not acknowledge anyone. On social media, a new kind of conversation begins. Not panic, not outrage, questions. Thousands of them. People argue about whether he is a god, an alien, a glitch in reality, or a government experiment gone wrong. There is no consensus because no one has a category for him. And for the first time in years, Vought cannot supply one. Inside the tower, executives realize the narrative war is slipping away from them. Their statements sound rehearsed and hollow compared to the live footage of Manhattan calmly walking through a world that seems to malfunction around him. They try to frame him as a danger, but he has harmed no one since the initial collapse. They try to frame him as unstable, but he is the calmest figure in every frame. A media analyst points out the real problem. People aren't afraid of him, she says. They're uncertain, and uncertainty can't be monetized. That sentence lands harder than any casualty report. Across the river, Butcher watches the feeds with narrowed eyes. He notices something others don't. The moments where Manhattan pauses, looking at empty space as if listening to something no one else can hear. Butcher realizes he is not reacting to what is happening. He is aligning himself with events that have not happened yet. He's waiting for things, Butcher says quietly, not reacting to them. Huey swallows. Like what? Butcher doesn't answer, because he's beginning to suspect that Manhattan is not here to change the world. He's here because the world is about to change, and he already knows how. As evening approaches, Manhattan stops walking and looks upward toward the skyline. Several news helicopters hover at a cautious distance, maintaining visual contact. Their pilots report no issues, but all onboard instruments continue to flicker with minor errors. Without warning, every helicopter in the sky drifts slightly to the left at the same time. Not pushed, not struck, simply repositioned by a force no one can feel. The pilots shout into radios, convinced they are losing control, but the aircraft respond normally to manual input. It is as if space itself has been gently rearranged around them. The footage goes viral instantly. People begin to understand that this is not telekinesis. It is not force. It is adjustment. Inside Vought, the scientific teams reach a new conclusion they do not want to present to the board. Manhattan is not altering objects. He is altering the relationships between objects. Distance, timing, position, variables everyone assumes are fixed are flexible around him. A physicist finally says what they have all been avoiding. He's not breaking the rules of physics. He's operating on rules we don't have access to. Homelander, still watching from his private suite, feels something unfamiliar creeping into his thoughts. Not fear of Manhattan harming him, but fear of Manhattan ignoring him entirely. Every moment that passes without a direct confrontation makes Homelander feel smaller in a way he cannot explain. He wants a fight, a threat, an excuse to prove himself. Instead, he watches a man who behaves as though Homelander is part of the background environment. Down in the streets, civilians begin gathering at the edges of Times Square again despite warnings to stay away. They want to see him in person, not out of admiration, but because seeing him through a screen no longer feels real enough. They need to confirm with their own eyes that this is happening. Manhattan turns slightly toward the crowd, and for the first time, thousands of people feel as though he is aware of them collectively, not individually, as a group, as a species. He raises one hand slowly. No one knows whether to run or record. Every phone in the crowd shuts off simultaneously. Not broken, not drained, just off. People stare at their black screens in disbelief, then back up at the blue figure who still stands calmly in front of them. For a moment, there is no digital layer between humanity and whatever he is. Just direct presence. And in that presence, something shifts in the crowd. They do not feel threatened. They feel exposed, as if he is observing them the way they observe animals behind glass. He lowers his hand, and the phone's power back on. Panic does not follow. Something quieter does. A deep, unsettling awareness that this being can remove the tools people use to understand the world without effort. Inside Vought, executives watch this unfold and realize a terrifying trend. Manhattan is not attacking infrastructure. He is demonstrating how fragile it is, how easily it can be ignored. A senior director whispers, "He's not destroying our systems. He's proving we never had control of them." Night begins to fall over Manhattan, and city lights flicker on as usual. But they do not stay consistent. Some streets glow brighter than others for no reason. Entire blocks dim and brighten in slow pulses like a living organism breathing. People film it from rooftops. News anchors struggle to describe it without sounding insane. Manhattan looks up at the skyline again. And then, across the entire city, every clock stops for exactly 3 seconds. Not slows, not glitches. Stops. Cars freeze mid-motion. Conversations hang in silence. Water stops flowing from taps. For 3 impossible seconds, New York becomes a photograph. Then time resumes. People scream. Drivers crash. Dishes shatter. The delayed consequences of those 3 seconds ripple outward in chaos. Manhattan stands still, watching the aftermath as if confirming a calculation. Because for him, those 3 seconds were not a pause. They were a demonstration. And somewhere inside Vought Tower, alarms begin sounding as their predictive systems fail completely, unable to calculate what happens next in a world where time itself has just proven negotiable. By nightfall, what happened in New York is no longer local news. Every major network across the globe replays the same footage on loop. Helicopters drifting sideways without force, phones shutting down in unison, clocks freezing across an entire city for 3 seconds that no one can explain. Governments begin calling Vought directly, demanding answers that Vought does not have and cannot convincingly invent. Satellite data confirms the time anomaly was not a broadcast illusion. Atomic clocks in London, Tokyo, and Berlin register a brief synchronization error at the exact moment New York stopped. The disturbance did not stay contained. It rippled outward like a stone dropped into water, faint but measurable. Physicists around the world begin arguing in real time over video calls, each of them reaching the same quiet conclusion that none of them want to say first. This is not a localized event. This is a presence affecting the planet. Inside Vought Tower, emergency meetings expand to include government observers, military advisors, and intelligence agencies that normally refuse to sit in the same room. The crisis is no longer about branding or public perception. It has become geopolitical, because the existence of something like Manhattan renders conventional power meaningless. Nuclear arsenals, surveillance networks, satellite defenses, all of it depends on rules that Manhattan has already demonstrated he does not share. A general from the Pentagon asks the question everyone is circling: can it be neutralized? Vought's lead scientist answers with uncomfortable honesty: we don't know if the word neutralized applies to something like this. Across the river, Butcher watches global coverage with grim interest. He has spent years believing that SUPs are the ultimate corruption of power. Now he is watching governments realize that SUPs were still part of the same game. They could be threatened, manipulated, or killed. Manhattan sits outside that entire structure. He's not a weapon, Butcher says quietly. He's a reminder. Huey looks at him. Of what? That none of this was ever as solid as we thought. Back in Times Square, Manhattan has not left the area. He stands near the partially restored building, occasionally looking upward at the sky as if tracking something invisible. The crowd that once gathered nearby has thinned, replaced by barricades and military vehicles keeping a wide perimeter. Soldiers hold rifles they know are useless, performing readiness for the sake of procedure. A convoy of armored trucks arrives carrying equipment designed for high-intensity electromagnetic containment. Engineers unload devices meant to create a temporary field around Manhattan's position. They work quickly, not because they believe it will work, but because doing nothing feels worse. The field activates with a low hum that vibrates through the street. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the hum fades, not because the machines fail, but because the sound itself seems to lose relevance. The devices continue running at full power, lights blinking normally, but the effect they were meant to produce simply does not exist around Manhattan. He glances at one of the machines briefly, as if acknowledging a curious attempt. Inside Vought, analysts watch the live feed and realize that Manhattan did not resist the field. He ignored it. The difference is subtle but devastating. Resistance implies engagement. Ignoring implies irrelevance. High above, news drones continue circling at a safe distance. One camera captures something unusual. Manhattan's gaze is no longer fixed on the city. He is looking beyond it, past the skyline, toward the horizon where the ocean meets the night. Moments later, reports begin coming in from ships off the eastern seaboard. Compass systems are malfunctioning. GPS coordinates drift slightly off course without explanation. Pilots in the air report brief disorientation as navigation displays flicker. The disturbance is spreading again, but not violently. Quietly, like a background process running beneath human awareness. Homelander watches all of this from Vought Tower, his expression harder now, less confused and more unsettled. He expected Manhattan to eventually force a confrontation. Instead, he is watching the world reorganize itself around a being who does not seem to notice or care. He mutters to himself, he's not trying to control anything. That realization frightens him more than hostility would. Because if Manhattan is not trying to control the world, then this is simply what happens when he exists inside it. On the streets, soldiers begin noticing a strange pattern. Their watches, though synchronized earlier, are now all slightly off by different amounts. Some lag by 2 seconds, others lead by 3. No two devices agree anymore. Commanders shout orders to recalibrate, but the problem returns almost immediately. Time is no longer uniform in Manhattan. A young soldier looks up at the blue figure and feels an irrational certainty that this is not accidental, that the city is not malfunctioning. It is adjusting to him in ways they cannot measure. Inside Vought, a data analyst overlays all reported anomalies on a map and sees a pattern emerging. The distortions radiate outward from Manhattan's position in irregular pulses, like waves of influence moving through space. She says quietly, he's not moving, but the world around him is. Silence follows as everyone processes what that means. Back in the safe house, Butcher leans back in his chair and exhales slowly. This isn't escalation, he says. This is demonstration. He's showing everyone that the systems they rely on don't matter to him. Huey nods slowly. So what happens next? Butcher looks at the screen, where Manhattan still stands under the city lights, unchanged by the hours that have passed. Next, he says, people stop trying to fight him and start trying to understand him. And that, more than anything, worries him. Because understanding requires a framework, and Manhattan does not fit inside any framework humanity has ever built. Across the city, clocks continue drifting out of sync. Military equipment hums uselessly. Governments argue over conference calls about a problem no one knows how to approach. And in the center of it all, the blue figure remains calm, patient, and observant, as if waiting for a moment that has already happened from his perspective. The world is beginning to realize that this is not a crisis to be solved. It is a condition to be endured. Before dawn, the tone of the response changes. Until now, every action taken around Times Square has been cautious, observational, restrained by uncertainty. As night fades into a gray morning, that restraint begins to feel like weakness to the people whose job it is to believe in force. Orders move quietly through federal channels, and by sunrise, Manhattan's perimeter is no longer just police and Vought security. It is the United States military. Armored vehicles roll into position at intersections surrounding the square. Soldiers establish layered zones of control, pushing civilians farther back than before. Sniper teams take rooftops again, not because they expect success, but because procedure demands readiness. Drones multiply in the sky, hovering at calculated distances like a mechanical halo around the still figure below. Manhattan stands exactly where he was the night before. He has not slept. He has not shifted. He looks the same as he did when he first appeared, as if time has passed only for everything else. Inside Vought International, executives watch the military mobilization with mixed relief and dread. Relief because responsibility is shifting away from them. Dread because they know the military is about to do something that will make the situation worse. A Pentagon liaison appears on a secure call, his tone clipped and professional. He asks for all data Vought has gathered so far, then ignores most of it. His focus is not on understanding Manhattan. It is on establishing that something, anything, can be done to assert control over the situation. "We need to test limits," he says. Vaught's scientists exchange uneasy glances. They have already seen what happens when limits are tested. Across the river, Billy Butcher wakes to the sound of helicopters multiplying overhead. He checks the feeds and sees the shift immediately. This is no longer observation. This is escalation born from discomfort. "They're about to poke the wrong thing," he mutters. Huey watches beside him uneasy. Maybe they have to, maybe they need to know. Butcher shakes his head. He already knows what they're going to do. That's the part they don't understand. Back in Times Square, loudspeakers crackle again. A military negotiator addresses Manhattan with formal authority, issuing instructions rather than requests. He orders the blue figure to step away from the area, to comply with federal command, to identify himself for national security purposes. The words sound firm, disciplined, and entirely meaningless in the open air. Manhattan does not look toward the source of the voice. He watches the horizon as if listening to something far beyond human sound. Minutes later, the first controlled test begins. A drone launches a small, high-intensity sonic device designed to disorient targets without lethal force. The device activates midair, emitting a pulse that rattles windows blocks away. Soldiers brace for a reaction. Manhattan does not move. The pulse reaches him and disperses like wind hitting a wall that cannot be seen. The sound bends around him, distorting into silence before it touches his body. On monitors, the waveform simply vanishes. The officers overseeing the test frown, adjusting parameters for a stronger pulse. Before they can activate it, every speaker in the area goes silent permanently. Not broken, just incapable of producing sound. Engineers test them frantically, unable to explain why functioning hardware refuses to output anything. Manhattan lowers his gaze slightly, acknowledging the attempt without emotion. The next test is visual. A series of high-powered strobe devices activate, flooding the square with blinding light meant to overwhelm the senses. The street becomes a flashing storm of white intensity. Manhattan remains visible at the center, unaffected. Then the strobes flicker once and stop, though their power indicators show full operation. The light exists, it simply does not project. Inside the command vehicle, tension builds. Officers begin to realize that this is not resistance. The equipment is not failing. Its effects are being rendered irrelevant. A colonel finally authorizes the next step, his voice tight. A non-lethal kinetic round is fired from a distance, designed to strike with force but not penetrate. The projectile leaves the launcher with a thunderous crack. It slows midair. Not stopping abruptly, not colliding with anything. It decelerates smoothly until it hangs suspended several feet from Manhattan's chest, rotating gently as if caught in invisible liquid. Soldiers stare through scopes in disbelief. Manhattan looks at the round with mild curiosity. Then it disassembles into individual fragments that fall harmlessly to the ground. No explosion, no deflection, just quiet deconstruction. Inside Vought Tower, Homelander watches this unfold with a tightening jaw. He has seen weapons fail against Supes before, but this is different. The weapons are not being stopped. They are being made conceptually pointless. He whispers to himself, he's not defending, he's redefining. Back in the square, the colonel makes the decision he will later regret. He orders a limited live-fire test, rationalizing that if Manhattan is truly indestructible, this will confirm it. If he is not, they will learn something valuable. Rifles crack in unison from multiple rooftops. Bullets streak through the air toward the blue figure. Every one of them dissolves into metallic dust several feet from his body, drifting downward like gray snow. The sound of gunfire echoes across the buildings, but the effect never arrives. Manhattan finally turns his head toward the soldiers, not angrily, not threateningly, simply acknowledging their presence for the first time. Every rifle in their hands disassembles simultaneously into neatly separated components that drop to the ground at their feet. No heat, no sparks, just parts no longer connected. A wave of silence spreads through the military perimeter as hundreds of trained professionals realize their tools have been removed from the equation without effort. Inside the command vehicle, no one speaks for several seconds. The colonel stares at the monitor, feeling something he hasn't felt in decades of service. Irrelevance. Across the river, Butcher watches the footage and exhales slowly. They've just proven his point for him, he says. Huey nods, which is that nothing they believe in applies here. Back in Times Square, Manhattan looks away from the soldiers and back toward the skyline. He is done acknowledging them. From his perspective, the interaction has already run its course. Military vehicles idle uselessly at the edges of the square. Soldiers stand unarmed, staring at a being who has not attacked them, yet has stripped their presence of meaning. And for the first time, command begins issuing orders not to engage. Not because they are afraid of being harmed, because they are afraid of proving again that they do not matter. Morning light spreads across Manhattan, revealing a city that feels subtly misaligned with itself. Streets are open but unused. News vans line entire blocks, their crews speaking in low, uncertain tones as if raising their voices might disturb something delicate in the air. The military perimeter remains, but it has shifted from aggressive posture to uneasy observation. At the center of it all, Manhattan still stands. He has not left Times Square. He has not attempted to communicate. He has not demanded anything. And that stillness is beginning to erode something far more important than infrastructure. It is eroding attention. For the first time since his arrival, the cameras are not focused entirely on him. They are focused on the world reacting to him. Inside Vought International, this shift is noticed immediately. Public conversation is drifting away from the blue figure as an object of spectacle and toward a larger question. What does it mean that he exists and nothing can be done about it? That question is dangerous to Vought, because it does not involve Supe's, heroes, or branding. It involves perspective, and perspective is something they cannot control. Several floors above, Homelander feels this shift like a physical irritation. For 2 days, he has watched the world reorganize itself around Manhattan's presence without ever needing him to intervene. The cameras have followed Manhattan. The fear has not. The admiration has not. There is no emotional energy for Homelander to harness. He decides to change that. Without informing anyone, Homelander exits Vought Tower and launches into the sky, his movement deliberate and visible. News helicopters pivot instantly, tracking him as he streaks toward Times Square. Civilians watching from rooftops point upward, relieved to see something familiar re-enter the narrative. This is what they understand. This is what they expect. The strongest Supe arriving to take control of the situation. Homelander lands heavily on the glass-sanded street, boots pressing into the remnants of the destroyed building. He does not hesitate this time. He rises into the air and positions himself directly in front of Manhattan, close enough that their faces are only feet apart. Manhattan shifts his gaze toward him with quiet recognition, as though acknowledging a recurring element in an experiment. Homelander speaks loudly, his voice carrying across the square. He declares that the city is under his protection, that he will not allow an unknown entity to destabilize it, that Manhattan needs to leave or there will be consequences. The speech is for the cameras, for the crowd, for himself. Manhattan listens without interruption. His expression does not change. When Homelander finishes, waiting for resistance, Manhattan responds in a calm, level tone. He does not address the threats. He does not argue. He simply describes what Homelander is experiencing at that exact moment. The need to be seen, the discomfort of being ignored, the fear that his role in the world is being quietly replaced. Homelander's jaw tightens as he realizes the blue figure is not engaging with his words. He is narrating his internal state as if reading from a file. People below cannot hear the conversation, but they can see Homelander's posture shift from confident to rigid. Something about the exchange is visibly unsettling him. Inside a safe house, Billy Butcher watches the feed and leans forward. "This is it," he mutters. "He can't stand being background." Huey nods slowly, eyes fixed on the screen. Back in the sky, Homelander tries a different approach. He moves closer, invading Manhattan's space in a way meant to provoke a reaction. He expects tension, resistance, something to push against. Manhattan does not move. Homelander's presence has no effect on him, not even a subtle adjustment. It is as if Homelander is pressing against empty air. Frustration rises in Homelander's expression. He circles slightly, trying to reposition himself as the dominant figure in the frame. Cameras track the movement eagerly. Manhattan remains still, and that stillness begins to make Homelander's movement look erratic rather than powerful. Finally, Homelander does what he has always relied on when words fail. His eyes glow red. The crowd gasps below as twin beams of heat vision fire toward Manhattan's chest with lethal precision. The air around them shimmers from the intensity. The beams reach Manhattan and bend. They do not reflect. They do not disperse. They curve gently around his body and continue past him into the sky, carving harmless lines into the clouds above. Homelander cuts the beams off immediately, stunned. He expected resistance. He expected deflection. He did not expect his attack to be treated like an environmental factor that could be rerouted without effort. Manhattan looks at the clouds where the beams disappeared, then back at Homelander, as if noting the outcome of a predictable test. Homelander feels something cold settle in his chest. This is not a fight. This is not a contest. He is not even being acknowledged as an opponent. He lunges forward suddenly, grabbing Manhattan by the shoulders in a desperate attempt to force physical interaction. His hands pass through empty air. He stumbles slightly in midair, thrown off balance by the absence of resistance. Manhattan has not moved. Homelander's grip simply found nothing to hold. Below, people murmur in confusion. This is not how Supes behave. This is not how power works. Manhattan speaks again, calmly explaining that physical interaction is optional from his perspective, that Homelander's attempts to assert dominance are based on rules that do not apply here. Homelander pulls back, breathing harder now, not from exertion but from something deeper, a realization forming that he cannot articulate. He is not being challenged. He is being observed. And in that observation, he is becoming smaller. Inside Vought Tower, executives watch in horrified silence. This is worse than a defeat. This is humiliation without violence. The world is watching Homelander try to matter to something that does not recognize him as significant. Back in the square, Manhattan turns his gaze away from Homelander and toward the horizon again, dismissing the interaction without hostility. Homelander hangs in the air for a moment longer, unsure what to do when aggression fails to produce meaning. Then slowly, he lowers himself to the ground. For the first time in his life, he has no performance left. And the cameras capture every second of it. By the time the footage of Homelander's failed confrontation finishes circulating online, something subtle but irreversible happens to public perception. People are no longer watching Manhattan to see what he will do. They are watching to see how everyone else reacts to him. The focus has shifted from the anomaly to the systems failing around it. Inside their safe house, Billy Butcher pauses the video on the moment Homelander's hands pass through empty air. He stares at the frame longer than necessary, studying the expression on Homelander's face rather than Manhattan's. "That's not fear," Butcher says quietly. "That's confusion." Huey leans against the wall, arms crossed. He doesn't know what to do when someone doesn't play the game. Butcher nods, because this isn't a game anymore. They both know what that means without saying it. Every tactic they've used against Supes for years has depended on predictability. Ego, violence, leverage. Manhattan offers none of those entry points. He is not a threat to be eliminated or a power to be stolen. He is something else entirely. Watches another clip on his phone, showing Manhattan standing still while military vehicles idle uselessly around him. "He's not escalating," says. "He's waiting." Butcher exhales slowly. Not waiting, observing, like he's watching something unfold that we haven't reached yet. Across the city, Manhattan remains where he has been since his arrival, but the environment around him continues to behave strangely. Electrical grids flicker in patterns engineers cannot map. Traffic flows in awkward delays, like drivers are responding to signals a second too late. The city feels like it is running on outdated software. People begin reporting déjà vu in large numbers, moments where they swear they have seen events happen before they occur. Psychologists go on television trying to explain it as stress and mass anxiety, but the reports are too consistent, too specific. Time feels unstable near Manhattan. Inside Vought International, this new development terrifies executives more than any physical demonstration of power. They have always relied on public certainty. Clear villains, clear heroes, clear narratives. Now people are questioning the nature of reality itself, and Vought has no spokesperson for that. A senior PR director says what no one wants to admit. He's making people think. That's the problem. Back in the safe house, Butcher turns off the feed. He doesn't need to watch anymore to understand what's happening. He's not here to destroy anything, he says. He's here because this place is about to fall apart on its own. Huey frowns. Fall apart how? Butcher looks at him. What happens to a world built on fear when fear doesn't work anymore? The question hangs in the air. Back in Times Square, Manhattan finally moves again. He begins walking, not toward Vought Tower, not toward the military, but away from the center of the city. Cameras scramble to follow him as he passes through streets that are slowly returning to normal activity. People step aside without being told. No one screams. No one throws anything. They simply watch him pass with uneasy fascination, like witnessing a natural phenomenon they don't understand. As he walks, small things begin happening around him. Traffic lights change without pattern. Storefront displays flicker. Street clocks drift further out of sync. None of it is dramatic enough to cause panic, but taken together, it creates the sensation that the city is slowly losing coherence. A news anchor describes it as atmospheric disturbance, struggling for words that sound reasonable. Manhattan stops briefly at a busy intersection and looks at a crowd waiting to cross the street. For a moment, dozens of people feel as though he is looking directly at them, not individually, but collectively, as a group organism. Then every pedestrian signal turns green at once across 4 directions. People hesitate, unsure whether to move. Cars remain stopped even though their lights are also green. No one knows which rule applies anymore. The confusion lasts only a few seconds before Manhattan continues walking, leaving the intersection in quiet disarray. Inside Vought, Analysts map his path and realize he is not moving randomly. He is tracing a line through the city that connects key infrastructure points, communication hubs, power stations, data centers. He is not touching them. He is passing near them. And each one begins experiencing minor, inexplicable disruptions shortly after. A technician whispers, "He's not breaking anything. He's showing how easily it could be broken." Homelander watches this from his suite, silent now. The earlier humiliation has settled into something heavier. He realizes he is no longer the story. He is a spectator in a world where power is being redefined without him. That realization gnaws at him. Back in the safe house, Butcher stands and grabs his coat. Huey looks up. "Where are you going?" "To see him," Butcher says. Huey blinks. "You can't be serious." Butcher shrugs. "He's not killing anyone, and I've got a feeling he already knows I'm coming." The team exchanges uneasy looks, but no one argues. They all feel it now. This is not something to hide from. It is something to witness up close. As Butcher steps out into the city, Manhattan continues his slow walk through streets that feel increasingly unfamiliar to the people who live there. Systems still function, but confidence in those systems is fading. People hesitate before trusting traffic signals. They glance at clocks before believing the time. They look at their phones as if expecting them to lie. Manhattan is not causing chaos. He is causing doubt. And that doubt is spreading faster than any physical damage ever could. The streets feel different to Billy Butcher as he walks toward where Manhattan was last seen. Not emptier, not more chaotic, but subtly disconnected from the rhythm he has always known. People move cautiously, glancing at traffic lights twice before stepping forward, checking their phones as if expecting reality to contradict them. For years, Butcher has navigated cities like battlefields, always aware of where Sups might appear, where Vought might be watching, where danger might emerge. Today, none of that awareness helps him. The threat he has prepared his life to fight is irrelevant here. He turns a corner and sees him. Manhattan stands at the edge of a small public park, watching children play on swings as if observing a phenomenon he finds quietly interesting. Parents nearby keep their distance but do not run. The fear that usually surrounds Sups is absent. What remains is something closer to discomfort, like being studied. Butcher approaches slowly, hands in his coat pockets. No weapons, no plan, just curiosity sharpened by years of hatred toward anything superhuman. Manhattan turns his head before Butcher speaks, acknowledging him without surprise. For a moment, they stand in silence, two figures from completely different philosophies of power facing each other in the open air. Butcher breaks it first. He asks what Manhattan wants, his voice low and direct. Manhattan answers calmly that wanting is a human motivation tied to future outcomes. He explains that he is here because events converge here from his perspective, that his presence is not a decision, but a point along a timeline he experiences all at once. Butcher frowns. "So you're saying this was always going to happen?" Manhattan nods slightly. He describes moments from Butcher's past with unsettling precision, choices Butcher made years ago that led him to this park at this exact second. He does not say this as an accusation or a threat. He states it as an observable sequence. Butcher feels a chill crawl up his spine, not because Manhattan is threatening him, but because he is describing his life as something already completed. Around them, the park continues as normal. Children laugh, leaves rustle, a dog barks in the distance. The normalcy makes the conversation feel even more surreal. Butcher asks the question that has been forming since the first footage aired. Are you going to fix this place or break it? Manhattan considers the wording carefully. He explains that the place is neither broken nor intact from his perspective. It is a temporary arrangement of matter and intention that will change regardless of his involvement. Butcher exhales slowly. So we don't matter to you. Manhattan looks at him directly. He says that mattering is a scale humans use to measure importance relative to themselves. From where he stands, humanity is part of a larger process that does not assign value in the same way. It is not cruelty, it is distance. Butcher studies his face, searching for arrogance, malice, superiority. He finds none of it, only calm detachment. "You're not here to fight anyone, are you?" Butcher asks. Manhattan shakes his head slightly. He explains that conflict requires opposing objectives. He does not share humanity's objectives, so conflict is unnecessary. Behind them, several pedestrians watch nervously, filming from a distance. They expect tension, escalation, something dramatic. Instead, they see two men talking quietly in a park like old acquaintances. Butcher finally understands something that has been bothering him since the beginning. Manhattan is not destabilizing the world by attacking it. He is destabilizing it by existing outside its assumptions. "You're a mirror," Butcher mutters, "and we don't like what we see." Manhattan does not respond, but the slight shift in his gaze suggests acknowledgement. Suddenly, Butcher feels an odd sensation, like a memory surfacing that he cannot place. He looks around the park and feels as though this moment has happened before. The same conversation, the same questions. He shakes his head, trying to clear it. Manhattan explains quietly that Butcher is experiencing a brief overlap between present perception and future memory, that this conversation has already occurred from his perspective. Butcher stares at him. "You're telling me I've already said all this?" Manhattan nods. A wave of unease passes through Butcher. He has always believed in choice, in action, in forcing outcomes through will. The idea that he is walking through events already decided feels like an insult to everything he stands for. He asks Manhattan if anything can change. Manhattan replies that change is constant, but not always in the direction humans intend. He says that the world Butcher knows is already shifting in ways that cannot be reversed, and his presence is only making those shifts visible sooner. Sirens echo faintly in the distance, but they sound far away, unimportant. The city continues functioning, but it feels like background noise to this conversation. Butcher finally asks the question he didn't realize he was holding. Are we already past the point where this place survives? Manhattan does not answer immediately. He looks past Butcher toward the skyline, where Vought Tower rises above the buildings like a monument to a system built on control. He says quietly that survival is a human concept tied to preserving what exists. What is coming does not involve preservation. Butcher turns to follow his gaze toward the tower, and for the first time he feels a sense of dread not directed at Supe, not at Vought, but at something much larger. He realizes that Manhattan is not warning him. He is informing him. And somewhere across the city, deep inside Vaught's servers, automated systems begin registering failures in data integrity that no one has noticed yet. The first sign that something is wrong inside Vought International does not come from alarms or explosions. It comes from data that no longer agrees with itself. Analysts arriving for the morning shift notice minor discrepancies in archived footage. Security recordings from the previous day show events occurring a few seconds earlier than they remember. Email timestamps contradict server logs. Internal reports reference meetings that, according to calendars, have not happened yet. At first, they blame system desynchronization caused by the time anomaly in New York. IT teams rush to recalibrate clocks across the network. The corrections hold for several minutes, then drift apart again, each system developing its own version of when things occurred. A senior engineer mutters, "This isn't corruption, this is divergence." Upstairs, executives are too distracted by public pressure to notice the quiet collapse happening in their own infrastructure. Governments are demanding answers. Shareholders are panicking. Media outlets are openly questioning Vaught's ability to manage a world where Manhattan exists without their permission. The narrative is slipping through their fingers, and they do not know how to grab it back. On screens throughout the building, Manhattan continues walking through the city, now several blocks away from Times Square. He moves with the same calm pace, occasionally pausing to observe buildings, intersections, crowds. Each place he passes begins reporting small, inexplicable irregularities shortly after. None of it is dramatic enough to call sabotage. All of it is unsettling enough to feel deliberate. Several floors up, Homelander watches the feeds in silence. He has not spoken to anyone since the confrontation. The earlier humiliation has transformed into something colder, a growing awareness that his role in the world is being quietly erased without anyone attacking him directly. He sees Manhattan walk past a news studio where anchors struggle to explain what is happening, and he feels a strange resentment. Not because Manhattan is dangerous, but because Manhattan is making everyone else look powerless, including him. Back in the server rooms, technicians begin noticing a pattern in the data corruption. Files related to Vought's history, especially those involving early Supe experiments and public manipulation campaigns, are the most affected. Records appear duplicated, altered, or out of sequence. It looks as if someone is rewriting the timeline of Vought's past without touching the present. They call in senior staff, convinced they are under a cyber attack. But no intrusion is detected, no breach. The data is changing from inside the system. A young analyst whispers, "It's like the records are adjusting to a different version of events." Elsewhere in the city, Butcher watches the live feeds from a cafe television, unnoticed among civilians who are more interested in Manhattan's path than the implications. He sees the blue figure pause near a data center that routes much of Vought's communications traffic. Butcher narrows his eyes. "He's not touching anything," he mutters. "He doesn't have to." Huey, sitting across from him, follows his gaze. "What do you think he's doing?" Butcher doesn't look away from the screen, showing them that their story only works if reality agrees with it. Inside Vought, panic finally breaks through the executive composure. Reports of data inconsistency escalate into emergency meetings. Legal teams worry that archived evidence could be rendered unusable. PR teams worry that historical narratives could unravel if old secrets surface in new contexts. They begin to understand that Manhattan is not attacking their building. He is undermining the foundation they built it on. A senior director orders a complete shutdown of external networks, isolating Vought's systems from the internet. The idea is to prevent further corruption. The result is immediate confusion. Internal systems continue drifting apart even without outside connection. One of the scientists from earlier speaks up. "He's not hacking us. He's demonstrating that our idea of sequence doesn't apply anymore." In his suite, Homelander hears the commotion through the walls. He steps into the hallway and listens as employees rush past, whispering about system failures and missing data. For the first time, he senses fear in the building that has nothing to do with SUPs or threats. It has to do with certainty. Back on the streets, Manhattan pauses in front of a large public screen showing a live news broadcast. He watches as the anchor confidently states that Vought is working with federal agencies to restore order and investigate the anomaly. Manhattan tilts his head slightly. The screen flickers. For a brief moment, the broadcast shows footage from years ago. A Vought promotional video presenting early SUPs as miracle protectors of humanity. Then it returns to the present, as if nothing happened. Viewers at home stare at their televisions, confused. Social media lights up with clips of the glitch. People begin questioning why old footage is appearing in live broadcasts. Inside Vought, executives freeze as they see the same glitch replayed from dozens of angles. They realize with growing horror that Manhattan is not exposing secrets. He is revealing context. Context they have spent decades burying under controlled narratives. Butcher watches this unfold and feels a grim sense of satisfaction, not because Vought is being attacked, but because something is forcing the truth into the open without violence. He's not destroying them, Butcher says softly. He's letting people see them clearly. Around the city, more screens flicker briefly with fragments of the past. Old advertisements, old interviews, old promises, each one appearing for a split second before returning to the present. People begin noticing patterns. They begin asking questions. And Vought realizes that this is more dangerous than any explosion could have been. Because once people start questioning the story they were told, the story stops working. By the next day, the conversation has changed everywhere. News panels are no longer asking what Manhattan is or what he can do. They are asking what his existence means. Religious leaders speak cautiously about divine presence without using the word miracle. Scientists argue on air about whether humanity has misunderstood the nature of time itself. Politicians avoid the topic entirely because there is no policy for something that does not recognize authority. Across cities far from New York, people report small sensations that feel familiar now. Brief moments of déjà vu, clocks drifting slightly out of sync, electronic devices flickering for no clear reason. Nothing dramatic enough to panic over, just enough to remind everyone that this is not contained to one place. Manhattan continues walking through New York at an unhurried pace, as if following a path only he can see. Cameras still follow him, but the frantic tone from earlier days is gone. Reporters speak quietly, like commentators observing a natural event rather than a crisis. Inside Vought International, the atmosphere has shifted from panic to resignation. Their systems still function, but no one trusts them completely anymore. Employees double-check timestamps. Executives hesitate before issuing statements, unsure whether the facts will remain consistent long enough to matter. They realize that Manhattan has not broken their infrastructure. He has broken their confidence in it. In his suite, Homelander watches a news segment showing civilians discussing Manhattan with curiosity rather than fear. Some call him a god. Others call him a sign that the world is bigger than they thought. Very few mention Supe at all. Homelander notices something chilling. For the first time, people are talking about power without referencing him. That absence feels like erasure. Across town, Butcher and the team sit in a diner watching the same coverage. Butcher notices the shift immediately. They're not afraid, he says. They're thinking. Huey nods slowly. About what? About how small everything they trusted really is. Outside, Manhattan stops at the edge of the Hudson River and looks across the water toward the skyline. For a long time, he does nothing. People gather at a cautious distance, whispering, filming, trying to interpret what his stillness means. He is not threatening the city. He is observing it like a completed structure. In Vought Tower, analysts begin tracking public sentiment across millions of posts and broadcasts. A pattern emerges that alarms them more than hostility ever could. People are questioning systems, questioning authority, questioning narratives they accepted for years without hesitation. They are not turning against Vought in anger. They are drifting away from the need for Vought at all. A senior executive stares at the data and whispers, "He's making us irrelevant without touching us." Back by the river, Manhattan raises his hand slowly. Across the city, screens flicker again, but this time they do not show the past. They show nothing. Blank displays. Phones go dark for a few seconds. Digital billboards fade to black. For a brief moment, New York loses its constant stream of information. People look around, disoriented by the silence. Then the screens return. Nothing appears changed, but everyone feels it. A reminder that the layer of technology they rely on to interpret the world can disappear instantly. Manhattan lowers his hand. In that quiet pause, something settles into public awareness. This being is not here to conquer, to demand, or to destroy. He is here, and that presence alone is enough to expose how fragile the structures of modern life really are. Butcher watches from across the city and realizes what has been happening all along. He's not the threat, he says quietly. He's the perspective. Huey looks at him. Perspective of what? Butcher stares at the skyline, of how temporary all of this is. Inside Vought, executives sit in silence, no longer arguing about strategy. They understand now that there is no strategy. Manhattan has not attacked them, and yet he has done more damage to their authority than any enemy ever could. Because authority only works when people believe in it. And people are starting to see beyond it. Back at the river, Manhattan looks out over the water as if watching something far away in time rather than distance. His expression remains calm, unchanged, detached from the consequences unfolding behind him. For him, this is not a climax. It is a point along a sequence that has already passed. And somewhere in the city, deep inside Vaught's most secure systems, data logs begin rearranging themselves again, aligning into a pattern no one has noticed yet. A pattern that suggests this unraveling is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Morning arrives over New York with an unusual calm. The streets are open, traffic moves. News helicopters still circle at a respectful distance. From a distance, the city looks almost normal again, as if the last several days were an intense but temporary disruption that people are eager to file away as history. But up close, nothing feels the same. People hesitate before trusting traffic signals. They glance twice at clocks before believing the time. Conversations pause awkwardly as speakers wait to be sure their words are happening in the present and not echoing from a second too early or too late. The systems still function, but the faith in those systems is gone. Manhattan stands on the edge of the river where he stopped the night before, looking out across the water toward the skyline. He has not moved for hours. Cameras remain fixed on him, but the urgency is gone from the broadcasts. Reporters speak in reflective tones, like historians describing a moment that has already settled into the past. Inside Vought International, the mood is eerily quiet. Executives no longer argue. Scientists no longer propose containment strategies. Analysts continue monitoring data streams they no longer trust. The building feels less like the center of power and more like a relic waiting to be acknowledged as outdated. Several employees quietly pack personal items into boxes without being told to. No one stops them. In his suite, Homelander watches Manhattan from a distance. His expression is not angry, not defiant, but distant. He has realized something he cannot unlearn. His power only mattered inside a system that believed in it. That system is dissolving, and there is nothing for him to push against anymore. Across the city, Butcher stands on a rooftop with Huey, both watching the live feed on a small screen. Butcher says nothing for a long time. He simply studies the blue figure at the river and the skyline beyond him. Finally, Huey asks, "Is he leaving?" Butcher shakes his head slowly. "Doesn't matter, the damage is already done." Back by the river, Manhattan lowers his gaze from the skyline to the water at his feet. He kneels and touches the surface gently. The river does not part. It does not react violently. Instead, a subtle ripple spreads outward in perfect circles, moving far beyond what the eye can track. Across the city, clocks stop drifting. Digital systems stabilize. Traffic lights resume consistent patterns. Phones stop flickering. It feels like a return to normal, but no one feels relieved. The stability feels artificial, like a restored backup rather than a living system. Manhattan stands again and looks toward the city one last time, not with attachment, not with judgment, simply with acknowledgement. Then without light, without sound, without motion, he is gone. He does not rise into the sky. He does not vanish in a flash. He is simply no longer there, as if he was a frame removed from a film that continues playing without him. For several seconds, no one reacts. Cameras remain pointed at empty air. Reporters hesitate to speak because they are unsure whether he has truly left or simply moved somewhere they cannot see. Inside Vought Tower, alarms begin chiming softly as systems report full synchronization for the first time in days. Executives look at one another, unsure whether to feel relief or dread. Because even though the systems are stable again, the people inside the building are not. They know now how easily everything they trusted can be made meaningless. On rooftops and sidewalks across New York, civilians slowly return to routines that feel slightly unfamiliar. They check their phones, look at clocks, and move through intersections with careful attention. Nothing is broken. But nothing feels unquestionable anymore. Butcher lowers the screen and looks out over the city. "He didn't change anything," Huey says quietly. Butcher shakes his head. "He changed how we see it." In the days that follow, conversations around the world continue shifting. People question authority more openly. Governments speak more cautiously. Vought releases statements that sound weaker than before because the confidence behind them is gone. Homelander appears on television again, smiling, speaking about protection and strength. The words land differently now. The audience listens, but they do not lean in with the same belief. Something has moved beyond fear, and no one knows how to put it back. Far beyond Earth, in a space where time does not move in the direction humans understand, Manhattan observes a version of this moment that has already passed. He does not feel pride. He does not feel regret. He simply notes that the world he visited will never return to the assumptions it once relied on. From his perspective, that outcome was inevitable. And on Earth, people go to sleep in a world that looks the same as it did a week ago, unaware that the foundation of how they interpret reality has shifted permanently. They believe the event is over. They do not yet realize they are living inside its consequences.